This is Meghan Enriquez, founder and CEO of True Conversations, and you're listening to Chasing Dreams with Amy J.
Welcome to Chasing Dreams podcast with Amy J. Amy believes that realizing a life without regrets is achieved by taking chances, chasing your dreams, making moves, and overcoming your doubts. The Chasing Dreams podcast will help you overcome life's obstacles, believe in your potential, and inspire you to face your fears. And now here's the woman who is passionately pursuing her dreams, Amy J.
Hey, Dream Chasers. This is Amy J, and you are listening to episode 109 of Chasing Dreams. Today, I have a wonderful guest for you guys. We were connected, actually, by a fellow podcaster. She is a podcaster herself. Her name is Meghan Enriquez. She is the founder and CEO of True Conversations. Soon after the birth of her second child, Meghan had what she calls a faceplant moment, which ignited her to create True Conversations. She is a highly sought after to speak with, train with, and interview with a variety of audiences around the most stigmatized issues of today: communication, leadership, and redefining true success. Meghan served as the intervention director at Johns Hopkins University for a clinical trial and is a mother of two. This millennial, Asian American entrepreneur who came to America as an infant adoptee earned her bachelor's in both exercise science and psychology from Slippery Rock University. And she is a very busy person, but has been kind enough to take this time to talk with us today. Meghan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Amy, thank you so much for having me.
How are you doing today?
Wonderful. I love connecting with people who have such positive energy, and I can already feel that you're one of them.
Well, I think that somehow the world has brought us together because you are doing some amazing things from what we had. And our friend Josh Rivers connected us because you're putting a conference on in my home state of Maryland.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about the conference? Like, what is that about?
Sure. Well, it's a short 3-hour event, but we at True Conversations had gotten used to doing coffee house chats in our first year. And when we were envisioning what we would do in our second year to help more people feel more validated, feel more capable, and also gain wisdom that was going to be exchanged in ways that we normally don't go about our lives exchanging them, we thought, let's help the female entrepreneurs in this state of Maryland and DC. Let's help the women who are hustling and grinding and following their passion to do it more, but not in a really short-term motivational way, a really changing on a gut and soul level way. And so we created the event, True Conversations Live, and it's centered around the screening of an award-winning documentary, lovingly called She Started It, which explains almost everything you need to know. And we'll also have a True Conversation panel discussion that reflects women here in Maryland who are at different stages of the female entrepreneurship journey. Everything from she works a full-time job and is just dreaming, and all the way through to successful global entrepreneur and even a politician, who's taking her passion and going in that direction to be a public servant to all of us. So we're excited to host that, and really the door's open to everybody.
I mean, it's such a motivating, inspiring event. So I definitely wanted to talk about that, but let's also kind of go back to you as a founder and where you came up with True Conversations, because we talked about in the introduction how you had a faceplant moment. Was that literal?
Mostly literal. I would say for about a year after I had given birth to my son, I spent the majority of my time laying down. So it was either on my, forward on my belly, on my face, or it was on my back. But
Pour it
right
on your face
after.
doesn't seem very comfortable.
No, I would really, at that point in my life, I would take any position I could as long as it allowed me to rest and just do the bare minimum of surviving and helping my children survive. So, making it as short as possible. Really, there are a number of things in my body after carrying two children that just weren't working anymore. My adrenal glands had stopped working, and that is what's responsible for getting us up and going. It's what handles stress. So, a lot of my ability to handle stress, even just day to day, was completely diminished. And so I love to call those moments faceplant moments because you have this great visual of, you're just walking around or jogging through life and everything's awesome. You feel like you're on top of the world or you're kicking ass at doing your roles that you might have in life. And then suddenly you just find yourself face planted onto the floor, and they have the biggest power to change you at those times. And that's what had happened, fortunately, for me.
So how is it that I might just be missing it? How is
Mhm.
it that you were on the floor and you had the inspiration for this true conversation? Like, I'm not seeing the connect.
Yeah,
What
right.
happened?
So at that time, prior to having this faceplant moment, really, I had been one of those people who really kept up with the expectations that society had for me. I was a great mom. I had all these play dates scheduled. I was a great businesswoman. I had a different business at the time in health and wellness, and I was, promoting and excelling, and I was, a mindful and attentive friend and wife. And so the method of communication that worked perfectly fine for me, that's used so widely, is more of sort of this motivational communication style. For example, if someone's going through a tough time, I was the friend who would say, "Oh, but there's always a silver lining." And I would focus on, the lesson to be learned and that you could do this. When I had this faceplant phase of my life and I could barely get through the day, I mean, my breathing was staggered, I could hardly stay awake. There was nothing that motivation would do for me. And it was a hugely impactful experience to develop finally compassion for people who are in that type of circumstance. And even if they're only in it a little bit. So I describe to people, when you're in this place, because you might go to a conference, you might go to an event or work with your coach, and the whole time you're thinking, F you, like, you don't know what I'm going through, right? There's
Yeah,
this disconnect.
sure.
You're like, I can't put myself in your shoes. There's something wrong with me. I'm not enough. You have something I don't. So feeling that disconnect for one of the most profound times in my life made me realize the way we communicate with each other and the way we lead in our personal and professional lives has to change. We need to be able to blend together being transparent and real so that we all feel more normal, we feel more capable, there's nothing wrong with you, and being uplifting and empowering, because there should be a purpose to being transparent with each other. There should be a reason that you're sharing yourself that way. And so putting those two together, I felt was a formula that the world was really craving. At least I know I was. And the more and more I started using that in my own life, the more and more people had finally came out and told me, "Oh my gosh, I've been craving for this shift as well."
And the interesting thing is, I mean, you're having these conversations about a variety of areas, it seems. Like
Hmm.
for moms, for people who young people in their 30s.
Hmm.
Let me people are young when they're 30s, guys. Just
Yeah.
let me go ahead and put that out there. But like there seems to be no limit on the topics that you're having these conversations about. And I mean, given that the concept is true conversation, I'm guessing that's intentional.
It is intentional. One of the things that's evolved, when I first started, I always knew I wanted to create this space and a platform and a vessel that could hold it all, that could hold all of humanity's experiences, that could hold our humanness. And our humanness is really, it's so diverse. You're not just a mom, you're not just a business person, you're not just a friend or a mind or a body or a spirit. You're all of it. And yet in each of those areas, there's stigmatized things that we don't like to talk about. And yet we need to be talking about, because each of us, the more we hold on to secrets and not letting out our truth, the more it's damaging our ability to perform and give into the community with our gifts. And it's also damaging our overall health and peace. So it was intentional, even against a lot of advice, to become more specific. It would continue to be in my heart to just keep it as broad as it's a stigmatized issue and we'll talk about it. So as the world has changed, even from when we began, for example, politics is now a much more stigmatized issue than it had been a couple years ago, at least in the forefront and really in our faces. So we get to partner with organizations that's their niche, and we get to help them have a voice and have true conversations from both sides of the table. So I love that it is broad, and I believe that the value of it being so diverse allows our listeners to bump into content that they would otherwise avoid. And there's a social responsibility to expose yourself to other people's perspectives, to other thoughts and beliefs around topics. So not having it isolated is very intentional.
The thing I like in particular is that it's almost objective, right? You said both sides of the table.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when we think, especially when we think we're right,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to bring that other side to the table. And that this is the thing, and something I'm thinking about this year a lot is, how we have to change our perspective. We don't have to agree with the new perspective, but we have to kind of change it to see that other side. Is that something that you find people have a difficult time doing when you have these conversations?
Somewhat. The people who have graciously been willing to go first, to be on either the podcast or be on our panel or attend an event, participate, or write a blog, like however they're sharing themselves and having these conversations with other people. I have been amazed by these people's ability to walk in with an open mind and an open heart and to respectfully disagree again, right? It's sort of a lost art to be able to respectfully disagree. And yet when you call upon people to do that, they show up and magic happens. There's so many examples I can think of where it was just like your jaw dropped because you're just listening to this conversation you never thought you would actually hear. And yet, when I go out and I work with college students or leaders in the community and I do a training with them, there is a lot of questions around, especially inviting someone to the table and having a true conversation when you already know that maybe what they stand for on the outside or what it seems to be that they're a proponent of is in such a negative light. Our perception, and I love you bringing up perception changing. Our perception is, well, that person's a bad person, so like, why would I want to bring them in? Or their perspective is so negative or hateful. Why would I want to invite them to the table?
Right.
And my response has been over and over, because not bringing them to the table, not being the first to say, I want to understand you, it's not working. Right? We see in our society that it's not working. We see how it affects government, how it affects policy, how it affects our families, our relationships, our marriages, everything.
Our communities.
By our communities. So we have to change. We have to be the first to say, I want to understand you and I'll be willing to listen to you. And over time, I believe that the more and more we do that without an expectation that they're going to do it back for us, that we are going to just create a new normal. And we're not going to be afraid of having these conversations anymore or stepping on people's toes or saying the wrong thing. So,
Meghan, you have an interesting background. You're an infant adoptee,
mm-hmm.
right? You're Korean?
Yes.
You were raised by white parents?
Yes.
Right? So you have a mixed cultural background,
mm-hmm.
right? As you were growing up, do you think that any of your experiences kind of helped influence the realization of these true conversations?
Yes. One of the childhood experiences that I got because of being adopted and because of growing up in a predominantly white community was that I was bullied a lot. That was one. And the second one, and what that did to me was from a very young age, I wanted people to understand me as a person. And so even though I couldn't control how people would treat me, I then just started going about my life, always seeking to understand the person behind the behavior, behind the skin color, behind the religion, whatever it was, I saw people for people. And so that laid a foundation of just this value system that we have in True Conversations, that we all have value, even if we don't agree. And secondly, my brother suffered from major depression from a very young age as a child and a teenager. And so again, just wanting society to see him for who he was, it really embedded this idea that we should try to understand each other better.
And it's interesting because we were also talking off the record before we started. You guys don't get those cool conversations, but we had them.
Yeah.
We had them before we got on here.
We did.
About how, myself as an Indian, when I go to India, I get looked at in a different way. I'm the American.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm here in the US, I'm the Indian.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm looking left and right. I'm like, okay, wait, so who am I today? Wait, what? What's going on? It's a confusion of sorts. And those kinds of experiences that we go through definitely influence us. But I'm stoked to see that yours had a positive influence upon you.
It mostly did. And, to be really real, there have been things as I grew up, right? Even in adulthood, we never stop learning. I'm always trying to learn more about why I am the way I am. And, of course, it had its negative influences as well. But as an adult versus a child, you get to choose differently. You get to work on yourself. You get to overcome whatever confidence or self-image or self-hatred, might have kind of bubbled up because of the experience you just mentioned of just never feeling you fit in can really translate, at least for me, it translated to not feeling like I was good enough. Mm-hmm. And so that's where behind the scenes, right? Behind True Conversations, I'm always working on myself because I can't ask people to have, say, vulnerable conversations if I'm not willing to do them. I can't ask people to share their most intimate truths if I haven't been there as well. And so I do that consciously so I can help more people.
Now I'm going to take you back because I imagine when you were 6, you didn't come up with the entire True Conversations place that it is today.
Correct.
What did you want to be when you were younger? What were your dreams then?
My dream, which it's actually very funny because I said correct, but if my answer, I realized, well, actually, maybe I did envision True Conversations.
Really?
Because my dream at age 6 was to interview people like Oprah interviewed her guests. It was either that or to become a journalist or documentary producer or director, and to just share people's stories for a purpose and that was, I think, affected by the different life experiences I mentioned before. And I just felt a big connection to, what I saw Oprah doing. And even at age 6, that's what I was envisioning. I took a detour when studied, like you mentioned, health and psychology, because that's how I felt was a practical path to have a career to help people. But the soul is a funny thing. It tugs you back eventually. So apparently I did know at a young age what I really wanted to be doing.
Well, I love that you turned around, even though, again, nothing wrong with the health direction that you took,
right.
But that your inner Meghan found a way for you to kind of come back to what you wanted to do. Because now you host a podcast network. You're doing those interviews, you're having those conversations. And I don't know, if you start producing documentaries of your conferences, you fulfilled that portion of your dream as well.
Yeah.
You said it, and this is kind of why I started this podcast, is practical. It wasn't necessarily practical, right? So a lot of people, I find, give up on things because it's not practical. And the whole point of this is, it doesn't matter if it's practical or not practical. Is it something you want? If so, go do.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I love that you're sharing these stories, because the more that we hear of people like us, right? We always think that someone who's doing what we want to be doing is different than us. But once you hear that, oh my gosh, they're like us and they have the same, maybe insecurities they've overcome or the same beginnings, and they're doing it, it gives you a little more belief that you can do it as well. And it gives you that courage. So I love witnessing people own who they really are and put that into action, even when they're scared out of their minds. I love to be there to witness that and to support that.
Well, let me ask you, having worked with so many people, have you run into someone who is struggling with that? Kind of like I have, where there's a practical side of them and they have something inside of them, you see it and you don't want to give it away. You're like, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. But how do you help them when you see that? Because I'm sure, I'm using the show to help showcase and motivate, inspire, and activate. But truly, everyday people probably face this more often than not. Have you faced that? And if so, what did you do?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was just having a conversation with a friend earlier today about this, because it's this friend's first time really taking a leap from the safety cliff of practicality of, I know I could do X, Y, and Z because I have that skill set. I will get paid this amount of money. But at the same time, my soul is dying. Or if people don't relate to that verbiage, you dread waking up in the morning to go do whatever it is that affords your living. And then, this person's like trying to leap over to the other side of the unknown, which is they don't know how they're going to make money, but they know it's not doing this. It's doing something that they can't even formulate because no one has done it before. And so for me, I totally can relate to that because I did that. I took that leap multiple times. The first one was when I had been working at Johns Hopkins in research, was climbing the ladder really quickly. 6 years in, I went from, I love my job. Couple things changed very quickly. And I went to, oh my gosh, I'm wasting my life at this job. My soul literally felt like it was dying because I have a very strong intuition, which is wonderful. And I think people don't even know that that's what's pulling them away from it. That, it's like tugging you and saying, this is not what you're supposed to be doing anymore. But our society has really made us afraid of failure, closing a door and saying, oh, I'm going to walk away from a career. I literally spent tens of thousands of dollars to get a degree in. I spent 6 years to build up where I am now. Who am I to be walking away? So I made the leap because I really couldn't live with knowing I was wasting time, precious time in my life. I did it responsibly. I remember sitting at the diner across from my husband, having a very practical financial conversation and expressing really how I was feeling, and that I felt I had a plan to exit and still provide for our family. And just at that point, it was, I will do whatever it takes to bring in the dollars that I needed to contribute to our family. And sometimes we have to get to that place of, I will do whatever it takes. And then, the universe or God or whatever kind of opens it up and goes, oh, now you're ready. Okay, let me send you this. And I reassured my friend today. I said, every leap I've taken, random. I mean, it's not random, right? Just serendipitous, amazingly cool.
It lines up.
It all lines up. I've never been without. Even though we've gone pretty close, right? But we've never crossed over that line. Someone has always helped. Something has always come about. So just to continue building your faith in whatever you believe in, is, I think, the most important.
Yeah, and I love that. Because if it doesn't happen the first time, a lot of people get dejected and they give it up. I gave it a shot, it didn't work out. Meh.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
so quick. Maybe it's because we're in a world where today everybody wants things fast, but everything has to line up when it's ready.
Yes.
But if you're passionate about it, you got to still kind of show you still believe in it by keeping up with it.
Hmm.
I mean, where would true conversations be if you had not had your faceplant moment? If you
Yeah.
just kept pushing it off?
Absolutely. And that's the thing that, story again and again, conversation again and again, when you really pull from people to have them reflect on their hardest moments in life, they reveal and realize the tremendous gifts that they were given because of that. And I just think that's the most beautiful, one of the most beautiful characteristics a pure person can have, is to be able to look at the really tough stuff and come out of it saying, yeah, it was really tough. I really don't want to ever have to do that again. But here's how it changed me into an even better version of myself. And yeah, true conversations would not have existed because I wouldn't have had that personal experience of recognizing the need for a communication leadership style like this, or in a mindset about going about your life like this. And when I started the business too, for what you mentioned earlier, that people sometimes wait for things to line up, or if it fails in the beginning.
Yeah.
I also share a lot that when I began True Conversations, officially, did the paperwork, had our first event, I wasn't even in the physical condition that you would think someone who's going to start something brand new would be in. I remember saying so many times, it doesn't make any sense for me to start right now. It doesn't make any sense. I'm not healthy enough. I don't have enough energy. Blah, blah, blah. But there was this undeniable force that really just wouldn't let me sleep until I was taking action on creating it. And I just believe, and I think we have that. We just don't listen to it. We ignore it. I now listen to my intuition all the time. And so I just kept trusting it. And I kept thinking, this needs to start now, because by the time the world really needs us, I will have learned a lot of the hiccups and the lessons, and I will have made the mistakes, and we'll be in a place to really serve our community. And not even a year later, like 11 months later, the world was changing. We got a new president. A lot of things in our society people became aware of. We were having conversations around it, even if they weren't respectful. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is why I started this back then. So not waiting for the perfect moment, because you have to give yourself time to just have a learning curve. And we're always learning constantly, so it never stops.
And you've actually had, the way True Conversations works is, you make nothing. You have
Right.
you have volunteers that
Yeah.
are participating and are a part of this. What has that been like to see people want to be a part of your vision?
Oh my gosh. That is so much more fulfilling, and gives me energy when what I have claimed a spot on in this world, of saying this deserves a place, this deserves to be created, just by simply creating True Conversations and believing it and learning and having the infrastructure. When someone comes into my life or hears about it and wants to connect with us, whether it's as an ambassador, or they want to be a host of their own podcast show, or they want to take on a bigger role, like as a volunteer staff member, and to watch them fulfill their purpose, and to watch them just have this fulfilling piece of their life, because many of them might work full time and they don't get that at their job, or they're soul searching, and their life has led them to us. It is so amazing, and it reminds me every day when that happens. I'm like, this is why we built this. This is why I had this vision. It was not just what were the conversations Meghan was going to have. I always knew, and in being so inclusive and so diverse, I always knew I would need people who would have very different life experiences, very different networks to be able to generate such quality and different voices and perspectives. So it's such a mutual, like, amazing thing. And if you were to sneak peek, sometimes on my Instagram account, I will like share texts between myself and these volunteers, mm-hmm. because we really live and breathe this value system of being transparent, real, uplifting, and empowering. And so even how we communicate with each other, it's that way. And we're both equally as excited. Sometimes I feel bad because I'm like, oh my gosh, I am so excited for you. I am so grateful for you. And they're just shining it right back. They're like, no, Meghan, I am so grateful for you and for, having believed in this and believing in me. So it's a really positive culture to be a part of. And it's an honor that I get to witness that.
And the thing is, I think you need that. I mean,
yeah.
As positive as the concept of true conversations is, and the fact mm-hmm. that it's an important thing to have, having a true conversation isn't easy. I mean, we talked about it earlier about having both sides at the table. You mentioned how previously, conversations weren't always polite, contentious, mm-hmm. Sometimes they just weren't, forget the word you use, aggressive or...
Yeah, respectful.
They weren't so much. And so the fact that you have this environment, these people who are willing to take that abuse, mm-hmm. I'm sure you're not encouraging to have them, yes, let's all sit around and have an aggressive conversation. I'm pretty sure that's not how you're trying to do it, but you have to have some kind of mental fortitude, I guess is what I want to say.
You do. You have to make sure. And that's what it just attracts, is it attracts people who really have such a huge heart and want to care enough to put themselves in the fire with people, and to be able to, they have a huge compassion and empathy capacity, and they have been through life enough to understand the value of healthy boundaries. And so, going in, it's sort of, we set the stage that, you're not responsible for changing anyone's mind. You're not, we have sort of like a list of, this is what your role is. And even with the people who are participating in the discussion, for example, we've had Republicans and Democrats talking together, and the way we set the stage so far, and our hope is that sort of the guidelines we have about the rules, how we're going to play this, right, is to generate a mutually honoring sort of vibe that, you're allowed to be you, and you're allowed to respectfully disagree. But the purpose of this interaction is to spread understanding. And oftentimes people come into it and they are like, well, yes, I'm going to spread understanding about my perspective. And that's fine. That's how it lasts for about 20 minutes. And then magically, every time, they start to see themselves in the other person. And wow. That's why it is so powerful, and why I love not just, doing it on our podcast helps model it for just everybody. They get to hear how that happens. They get to be changed by the conversation themselves. But of course, where I want to be seeing it is I want to be taking that and teaching our young leaders and, our students in the country how to do that, because what amazing things could happen if we all started really talking together again for solutions. So,
and I think with the way you're going and how things are evolving, it's only a matter of time before you can do that. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Oh, thank you so much.
Now,
it feels right.
I mean, I love it. I love that there is someone brave enough to do this work. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, there's everyone I'm sure says it on the inside, we should talk about it, but you're here doing something about that as well. And that's commendable on a number of levels.
Thank you. And I think it's very important to, and I tell my volunteers this as well, you can't be an ambassador for a culture or a mindset like True Conversations unless you're doing it in your private life as well. So for sure, I have had the toughest conversations. I've been willing to have them, behind the scenes, but that's, you can't do this kind of work without walking the talk that you're sharing.
Absolutely. Now, Meghan, before I let you go, what is one thing, one action you would tell a dream chaser to take today?
Gosh. The thing that comes to mind for me today is to get to know yourself. And that sounds so simple and it could take you years. But I think that in our society, we don't value, we value studying things. We value studying academics. We value studying skills and even personal growth. We can kind of spiral out of control and think that just by reading a book, you're really going to change yourself. What I mean by getting to know yourself is having true conversations with yourself, really being honest and open just internally before you even share it with anybody about what you like, you don't like about yourself, about what you wish you had had as a child that maybe you didn't. Just layer by layer by layer, there's always going to be something extra to discover to get to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you get to take action to honor who you are. And just as a quick example for folks, if that sounds so like philosophical and unreachable, it's just recently over the summer, I was really struggling with a couple of things. I was like, gosh, why don't I feel as fulfilled, for example, like at home as I do with my business? Like I want to make sure I'm balanced and that I love being with my kids just as much as I love creating this company. And one of my ahas was that, well, ever since having children, I had really dishonored my own need to travel and to experience newness. And that was a choice I made. I always take ownership over the choices I make. I don't blame anybody. But just that realization of, oh my gosh, Meghan, in your core, this will never change. You will never one day wake up and not feel the need, at least a couple times a year, to get on a plane and fly somewhere. That's just who you are. So, again, I had these conversations with my husband and with myself, and I just put a line in the sand and was like, okay, whatever it takes, I'm going to find opportunities to travel this year because then I can honor myself. So that's what I would say is put just as much work into finding out who you are as you are putting work into whatever it is you want to create and whatever dream you want to chase.
I love it. That's fantastic advice, guys. Pay attention to that. Meghan, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your story of True Conversations and just your dream chase overall. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, guys, that was Meghan Enriquez. How awesome is she? I mean, having a dream like True Conversations is definitely something I think the world needs, but even more importantly, she's chasing her dream and she's doing what she loves. And that little 6-year-old girl, she is living it up right now. And then that is fantastic. Guys, take her advice to heart. And for more information about True Conversations, Meghan, and the episode, please visit chasingdreamshq.com/episode 109. That's episode 109. Till next time, guys, keep chasing.
Thank you so much for listening to Chasing Dreams. Amy would love to connect with you and hear all about your pursuit of chasing your dreams. Connect with her on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram via @ChasingDreamsHQ. Or you can find Amy on Twitter @AmyJ21. That's AIMEEJ21. Be sure to visit headquarters over at ChasingDreamsHQ.com for more inspiration, motivation, and resources to help with your own dream chase. We hope you'll join Amy next week, and until then, keep chasing.